Greetings, Internet. I'm Jonathan Osting, Capitol reporter with MLive Media Group, here with my colleague Emily Lawler and, of course, Governor Rick Snyder. The governor is joining us today for a year-end chat. Governor, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Likewise, likewise. Governor, obviously, let's jump right in here. One of your big priorities for the year has been road funding. This chat happens to coincide right in the middle of ongoing discussions about road funding. Where are you? Do you see something getting done still this year?
Well, I'd really like to, because it's a big issue, and we can't wait. I mean, the longer we wait, the bigger the problem becomes. So urgency is involved with this. Well, I would say it's a very challenging question, though. And if you look, the Senate had a plan, the House had a plan. I would step back from getting too far in the details, but say there are several principles we're trying to address when we're having our quadrant meetings about this. It starts with saying, how do we get in the range of $1.2 billion or more for roads? Everyone's heard that number. As part of that, though, how do you do it in a way where you don't necessarily have to harm other groups, whether it be schools or local government or any party, with making other budget changes? How do you look at the question of saying our gas prices shouldn't get too high, because that would make us less competitive? And then theoretically, a lot of people feel strongly that we should get the retail sales tax off because dollars that are associated with fuel aren't going to roads.
Sure.
And there's a fifth element to some degree. If you look at other options, you don't want to create too much of a regressive tax environment that could put an undue burden on particularly lower and middle income people. So you really have a series of 5 principles. And when you look at that and you have some clearly different philosophical dimensions from the legislative leaders, it's quite a challenge to balance those. But we're working hard on it still.
Senate Majority Leader Randy Richardville today started discussing, obviously this has come up before, but was talking about a ballot proposal, and maybe that actually being the solution rather than a second step, which I think is how you've characterized it before. Is that something you could sign off on? I mean, you want to get something done right now, right?
Yeah, my preference is something more immediate, but as a practical matter, the real question is going through that list of principles, how many of those boxes can you check in a good policy way that actually addresses them all? And so that's where I'm open to people being creative, because the main thing is we need to fix our roads, again, respecting those other constraints, and I'm open to many options on that.
Okay. Do you have a deadline? I mean, obviously, lame duck is
well, I'm looking at my watch right now in terms of, for lame duck as a practical matter. But what I would say is I have a philosophy I operate, relentless positive action. And this one on roads, I can say there's a little more emphasis on the our part. So if we don't get something done now, we'll just be back at it again after the first of the year. And that's where it's an honor of continuing being governor. Let's put it in historical context. I've been working on this for 2 or 3 years now, and people say, "Wow, that's a long time, Governor." Well, I'm very proud. We've gotten a lot of big things to happen faster than that. But the last time this happened was '97, and when you talk to the people that were around in that environment, it took them 8 or 9 years. Clearly, I don't want to be in the 8 or 9 year circuit, but this is hard work.
Sure. You've obviously got a lot of things going for you to get it done now, though. I mean, gas prices are very low right now, which makes it an easier environment if you are talking about tax increases. Obviously, we've got a lame duck legislature, and we've got a legislature coming in that seemingly might be a little less interested in doing this than the current one. If it doesn't get done now, I mean, is it going to be 4 more years before we have this discussion again?
No, we'd again have a discussion. That discussion is going to happen one way or another. The question is about getting results. And as you said, there's some favorable conditions right now. From a logical point of view, we should be able to get something done. The challenge when you have 148 legislators plus a governor is you can get politics. And when you're talking about tax increases in particular, it's a very difficult topic. I believe it's the right thing to do to solve our road issue. Other people have more challenges, and then again, how to do it with respect to these other principles.
Sure. All right, Governor, we're going to be taking questions from readers today, and we've also asked reporters at each one of our hubs to submit some video questions for you. So we're going to start out with one of those from Rosemary Parker of the Kalamazoo Gazette.
I'm Rosemary Parker, one of the reporters who authored this series. Rosemary Parker, one of the reporters who authored this series on Michigan's high waiver rates for parents who opt their children out of vaccination for school. And my question is, Do you believe Michigan should stop allowing parents to obtain waivers for philosophical reasons?
I would have a real challenge saying we should stop it totally, because again, you're the parent, and what's the appropriate role of government? At the same time, I think we should work hard on making sure we're providing the right information, the right educational things, and making sure parents understand what the conditions could be if they're not vaccinated, both in terms of their own health risk, but also what risks they may be presenting to others if they get it in terms of the spread of certain illnesses. Because we're starting to see that again, where we thought we almost had eradicated some of these conditions, these childhood illnesses. Now they're creeping back in because kids weren't vaccinated. So there's a balance there.
Sure, your administration is obviously concerned about this. I know the Department of Community Health has brought up this issue before.
Right.
So you're saying education is the best step at this
Well,
point?
education, communication, to be proactive on those kind of things.
Sure.
Because a lot of times people don't have all the facts.
Sure.
Governor, more moments before you came on the show today, the unemployment numbers came out for this month.
Yeah.
They're the lowest since April of 2006. Tell people what that means for Michigan going forward.
Yeah, that was great news to hear. It's 6.7%. And as you said, Emily, the lowest since 2006. That just shows the comeback in Michigan's going on. That is more and better jobs. And when you convert it, I always talk about how many private sector jobs. We've now passed the 300,000 mark. So that means people have good jobs, their families are better off, the whole economy is doing better, and that shows the path we're on. So I believe a lot of the environmental conditions we've done in terms of tax reform, regulatory reform have been good contributors to that. But again, it's free enterprise working too. So let's see it keep going.
Well, Governor, I'm also going to be bringing you some questions from readers and stakeholders throughout this discussion. And my first one is from your alma mater, actually, the University of Michigan School of Nursing. And these are their words, not mine. Should the Michigan legislature squander healthy Michigan progress or care for new patients by passing Senate Bill 2? This is the bill that would give nurses advanced training more authority.
Yeah, well, again, I think there's a lot of good discussion going on. I think there's a balancing act. Because again, it's being more proactive in the healthcare world, allowing more flexibility. But we need to do it in the context of how doctors and nurses can best work together. So I think progress is being made on that bill. I haven't had a chance to review it lately, but again, the concept is one that is generally worthwhile to have a good discussion on. In terms of squandering Healthy Michigan, we're seeing good results under Healthy Michigan. That's the exciting part. That's one of the things I'm proudest of over the last year is we've got 477,000 Michiganders signed up, which was what we thought could be the lifetime cap for going in this program. We're less than a year into it. And more important than the number of people is we've seen well over 100,000 plus preventive care visits. So it's actually making positive impact on people's lives. So we've done some great things on healthcare. And again, this could be a good step in moving it forward in this fashion.
Good deal. Governor, we're going to take you to another video question. This one comes from Stephen Klusterman of the Muskegon Chronicle.
Hello, Governor. It's Steve Klosterman here in Muskegon County at the site of a proposed tribal casino. We have another casino proposed for downtown Muskegon, but both ideas don't seem to be going much of anywhere. New casinos, we know, need your approval, but you've not been a fan of casino development in the past. Now you've got 4 more years. Will Muskegon or any other place in Michigan get a new casino in the next 4 years? What odds would you give those who are backing new casinos? Thanks.
I see that deck of cards. I see you're quite ready to go, really hoping that casino arrives sooner rather than later. What I would say is I think there's an opportunity to potentially see more, but it needs to be done in a thoughtful way. Because one of the issues I have with casinos, to be open with you, is all the social service issue with it, in terms of the potential criminal justice elements, making sure that families are being supportive and gambling is not becoming an issue in their life. So I think there's a balancing act. In terms of that particular one, I think there is some progress moving forward. It's now with the federal government right now in terms of where the ball is. So I would say I'm open-minded, but let's keep talking on the casino front. I don't expect to see a casino on every corner in Michigan, though.
What do you think about the economic impact for a community getting a casino, or even an arena for that matter? I mean, obviously we're seeing progress being made there in Detroit. Do you think these are economic drivers, big venues like this?
Well, they can be. Again, the arena one's clear in my view, because casinos have a pro and con. I mean, someone's winning money, someone's losing money.
Sure.
And so you can wonder what's the net gain to the economy in some of those. But in terms of economic development, the new arena district, the entertainment district in Detroit, is very exciting for me. And again, traditionally I don't believe in overly subsidizing those things. This one in particular has great appeal because it's really a connector between Midtown and downtown Detroit.
Sure. Governor, obviously you asked the legislature this year to discuss the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act and whether it should be expanded to include some new anti-discrimination protections for LGBT citizens. That discussion happened, but the legislation hasn't gone anywhere. Are you happy with that outcome?
I think there should have been more discussion. It didn't advance as much as I would have thought, and I'll continue to make that call. So that would be something you're going to continue to see me make a point of, to say there should be an ongoing discussion after the first year on Elliott Larson.
Okay. One bill that did advance was introduced alongside of it is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It's not clear yet whether the Senate is going to vote on it. Do you have any thoughts on that bill?
Well, Speaker Bolger did that with Elliott Larson, to kind of a package, because he looked at various concerns of members, saying this could be a balance between the two. And what I would say is I appreciate him being proactive to really get the discussion going on Elliott Larson. During this process, they sort of became decoupled. So what I would say is I have a much greater degree of concern and a higher level of scrutiny to the extent they're separated, as opposed to being a package.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. We're going to go to another hub question, this one from the Grand Rapids Press, Andrew Kreitz.
Hey, Governor Snyder. My name is Andrew Kreitz. I'm a reporter with MLive.com and the Grand Rapids Press. Thanks for taking my question. Following the tragedies in Ferguson, Missouri and New York City, the issue of police body cameras have been a hot topic here in Grand Rapids. Can you explain your views on equipping police officers with body cameras, including state police? And what do you make of a proposed trial of body cameras here in Grand Rapids? Finally, one more question for you. What can be done to strengthen relationships between police officers and the communities they serve? Thanks.
Yeah, Andrew, you asked several questions. That was good, how you managed to sneak in some extras while you were at it. I appreciate that. If you stop and look at it, though, I'm going to sort of reverse the order of how you approached it, because when you talk about body cams, that's very much a personal level issue. That's a tool. The bigger question is, how do you address potential concerns about what the police are doing and the whole issue of racial affairs, and how do you manage the big picture? Because that's the part I focus in on, and then say within that context, how do body cams fit? And so what I would say in Michigan, we've been proactive on that whole question. Ferguson and the incident in New York actually are causing us to redouble our efforts, but we had spent a fair amount of time saying, how do we build good community relations between the criminal justice system and communities? So over the last year, we've had actually two places we had great sessions were in Flint and Saginaw. And I went to the one in Flint. They had more than one there, where we convened the community by bringing the criminal justice sector together, both local law enforcement, state law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, the whole system, and also brought in community leaders, faith-based leaders, the mayor, city council representation, and talked about this issue about, if we have incidences, how do we make sure we have good relations? How do we avoid that incident to happen at all? But if something happens, how do you respond? To be very proactive, to be on top of it. And in fact, I did another meeting just this week to say, we have a good start, but as I said, with these situations, let's make sure we're being even more thoughtful and thorough about defining good community relationships and then procedures if you have issues that need to be addressed effectively. Now, within the context of all of that, body cams fit in particular. I'm supportive of the concept. I think they're relatively new. I view it as largely a local decision or a jurisdictional decision about what they want to do. I think it's important to pilot them to find out the best way to use them, strike the right balance, because it's not an inexpensive option. So I think it's great that people are deploying them now in some thoughtful way, and then as you get experience, hopefully we can continue to developing what are best practices for body cams. And I'll give you an illustration. One of the questions we've got, not from law enforcement, but from citizens, is what do you do when you're in someone's home? and you've got a body cam on, or you're dealing with a domestic dispute.
Sure.
There's actually cases where the citizens want you to turn it off. But how do you make sure you're recording, making a record of that right? So this is where, as we get experience, I think we can work through these issues appropriately, and I would expect to see more use of body cams.
Sure. From a state police level, though, do you want to see it piloted at the local level first?
State police has already been doing some work. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting. All right. We got one more public safety question. This one from Detroit, reporter Gus Burns.
Hello, Governor Snyder. This is Gus Burns. I'm a public safety reporter in Detroit. And I was wondering, being that you've worked so closely with the city over the last year and a half, and you probably have gained some insight that a lot of the general public does not have, I was wondering if you could make one change or one improvement to the Detroit Police Department, what would it be?
Yeah, well, I appreciate your question, Gus. What I would say is, and I don't want to sound flip about this, but that's not my job. Because again, this goes to the whole issue. People perceive I've been running the city of Detroit through an emergency manager or something. The city needs to run the city well, and that's the point of having a police chief, a mayor, or city council. I'm there to be a supportive partner. I intend for us to continue to be a good partner with the Detroit Police Department in particular, but I'll give you an illustration because I don't want to just sort of ignore your question. But one area that Chief Craig was included in the discussion I had earlier this week about community relations. And I appreciate it. He's been one of the leaders, I think, in the state on speaking on this issue about bringing people together. So that's a case of, I'm not going to tell the DPD what they should do, but I want to be a partner to say I appreciate his leadership, and we're going to continue to partner on community relations, on how we can do more in the neighborhoods in particular to deal with crime. And we're on a lot of task force with the Detroit Police Department. The state police are in particular, about helping bring down crime, and crime has come down. Violent crime is down in Detroit, Flint, Pontiac, Saginaw. The programs we put in place, the Secure Cities program, is starting to have some positive impact.
Still too high, though?
Still too high, but again, you start by improvement. And it's not an overnight thing. I made that message a couple years ago or so, but we've seen double-digit decreases in violent crime in these communities. That's material.
Sure.
Governor, I want to switch gears on you a little bit. I know that talent is a focus of yours going into 2015. This is a reader question that is a talent issue I'd not heard of before. David Shane is our commenter here. He says, I have a PhD in physics and I'm happily employed right now, but when I moved to Lansing, I was considering employment. I was open to teaching physics at the high school level, but quickly learned it would be illegal for me to do so because I don't have the proper certification. Some states have fast-track programs that make it very easy for someone holding a PhD to teach in that field. Michigan does not. Why not set up some sort of fast-track program for PhD holders?
No, I'm very open to that. That's a question I have heard before, and I tend to agree with what they're saying. Again, certification is actually to say you have the credentials and experience and the training to be successful. But quite often, we've got a lot of people, not only in David in his case, but a lot of people that have retired. That have tremendous knowledge, and not just in traditional classes like physics. Think about the career tech ed fields, where you have all these welding classes, or we want to expand, and you've got people that have been welding for 20, 30 years that want to go help out and give some instruction. So the real question is how do we get them up to speed fast enough, and I think we should be looking at that. I've made that joke myself, that someday when I'm done being governor, I want to go teach, and I could teach in college, but I couldn't go teach accounting in high school. And I think I'm a pretty good accountant still.
Now, what part of that was a joke, Governor? I did hear a news report that you are interested in a post-political career.
That's my third career I'm looking for. It's to be a teacher-professor.
Okay. What area? Obviously, you taught some before.
I did. I was an adjunct assistant professor of accounting. I taught in the MBA program at Michigan when I was 24.
Sure.
And did that for 2 or 3 years. And I taught tax back in those days. Tax and accounting. So it may not be very exciting for most people, but that's something to share. But again, this is where I'm happy to see, can I help people in public service or understanding, some of the policy issues in many areas now.
Sure. Well, I got a segue there. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. There's been a lot of national scuttlebutt about your viability as a presidential candidate in 2016. Any interest in running for higher office?
I'm focused on being governor. I mean, if you stop and look at it, it's interesting with 2016, how many dozen people have been brought up? So it's a huge group. What I would say is it's a reflection, to some degree, that one, the governors are the place to go. And I do believe that if you look at the best candidate pool, likely it will be someone that's a governor. The other part is that I think is good for Michigan is that we're being recognized, the state is, for the comeback and good things going on in the state, which is actually to our benefit to have the state viewed as a very positive place, as a good place, because quite often that perception is lagging behind when you think about history. But I'm excited being governor, and I just got reelected, and I've been pretty busy on Michigan issues.
Sure. A gentleman who I believe is, a friend of yours, Jeb Bush, announced that he's actively considering a run. What do you think about his presidential
I think that's great. Actually, I view Jeb as a friend, so I think that's the kind of thing that says it's great to see people out there. And if you know it, he's a former governor.
Sure, absolutely. All right. Obviously, you're just off a re-election bit, or the campaign trail. Education was a hot topic this year on the campaign trail, and obviously it remains a hot topic in the public discourse. Several of our hubs actually submitted some education-related questions for you today. We're going to go to one now. This is from Dominic Adams of the Flint Journal.
Great.
Hi, I'm Dominic Adams with the Flint Journal. Given its declining enrollment, climbing deficit, and possible standstill with employee bargaining units, how likely is it that Flint Schools will encounter state intervention in 2015 under Public Act 436?
Yeah, well, I appreciate your question, Dominic. The Flint schools are challenged in terms of their financial situation and some of their operating measures in terms of their student count. We don't just simply say we're going to go in under 436. It's an objective process. And so it's not a subjective decision. So the way it works is 436 outlines 15 to 20 different criteria that you do an analysis to say if those are present, then you have to go to the next stage. What I would say is we're still trying to work with them through a deficit elimination plan with the Department of Education, with Treasury supporting them. Hopefully that can be successful. But again, we have a responsibility to see if they're tripping those triggers for 436, then we might have to take it to the next stage.
Governor, there is some legislation right now that is moving in the legislature that would address distressed schools specifically. And as far as I understand it, it might make it actually easier for a district to go into emergency management. But do you think that's a right move? Does the state need to be more proactive?
Yeah, I'm aware of the bill out there. Actually, that wasn't something that I was actively promoting.
Okay.
So that's something that I'll just be reviewing as part of the whole process. But it was interesting to see that was more from a legislative motivation that people are looking at that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things on education I really am focused on, and there are a number of bills going through, I hope, is on an early warning system in terms of improving some of the practices that we can work with schools and potentially municipalities on to better identify them, because I don't want to do emergency managers. So how can we work earlier in the system to identify those issues and solve them when it's easier to solve them? Because by the time you get there, some of these are pretty tough situations.
Yeah.
So let's work more proactively on the front end, and how do we help people be successful?
Okay, well, I hope we didn't steal the thunder from these two other questions here, but we've got two that are a little similar, so we're going to play them both at once and allow you to respond after. We got Ben Freed at the Ann Arbor News and Mark Tower at the Saginaw News.
Hi, I'm Ben Freed, a general assignments reporter at the Ann Arbor News. Even Ann Arbor Public Schools, one of the top districts in the state in terms of both size and academic performance, is feeling pressure from state budget constraints. The superintendent and school board president recently released a joint statement saying the district will have to work collaboratively in facing our persistent challenges with inadequate school funding from the state. What can be done at the state level that isn't being done now to ensure that school districts have a sense of stability? And do you see further consolidation of school districts across the state as a possible solution or even a necessary remedy moving forward? Thanks, Governor.
Saginaw County is no stranger to school districts in distress. Two of our districts are currently working with the state to eliminate large deficits. One district folded entirely last year, and taxpayers just last month rejected a millage intended to pay off the district's $4 million in debt. Given the challenges facing school boards in Saginaw County and across the state, what will be your strategy moving forward to help our public schools both remain fiscally solvent and to do right by the students in terms of maintaining and improving academic achievement?
So, Governor, obviously some very different circumstances there. Ann Arbor tends to be an affluent area. They're talking about budget problems. Obviously, in Saginaw County, there's been a couple high-profile districts there that have gone through struggles. So the two questions were about stability for funding and also, fiscal solvency.
Yeah, if you stop and look at it, and look at the big picture, the early warning system is an important mechanism about how we can work with school districts earlier in the process to look at their financial issues. If you look at what we've done over the last 4 years, though, we put a lot more resources in our public schools, in K-12. I mean, literally the last budget I approved was $1 billion higher than the year before I took office. That's a large increase. And part of the challenge you're finding with schools is they're going through declining enrollment. I can't speak specifically for all these, but well, the Saginaw ones in particular, I think we're having declining enrollment. That creates a lot of pressure or a problem. That's not a financial issue per se. That's an attendance issue. And so it makes it tough, though, as you go down. You'll have a lot of fixed costs, and how do you manage through that? That's where I want to be proactive with this early warning mechanisms, other things to think of. That's where I've encouraged service sharing and service consolidation, let alone legal consolidation, where districts get together to say they can share bus services, food services, be more cost efficient on that. So there's a lot of good hard work still to do. What I would say is the ones that are in real trouble tend to be a fairly small handful. And hopefully as our economy improves, conditions come back, that makes it easier and better for all of us. That's the point of more and better jobs. It helps strengthen our economy, gives us more resources, and actually hopefully get our population growing again. That's another feature to have more kids in these schools.
Sure. What else do you have in the pipeline for next year for schools? What do you see as your top priorities next year?
Well, in addition to looking at these financial and operational metrics, more accountability and transparency. I want to really say how we can look at the bar, whether you're a public school or a charter school, in terms of performance, financial performance and operational performance. Beyond that, there are two areas that I really want to focus in on. And you can sort of draw a circle around it. I call our system P20, prenatal through lifelong learning. Draw a circle around prenatal through third grade, because one of the most important metrics is, can you read successfully by the time you're finishing third grade? That's something we need to do better on, and you can't start in third grade. So it's really, how do we resource that? We've done a lot by bringing in the huge preschool investment we have, but I want to get better and better to say what kind of programs we can offer, how we can partner with schools on being better at that. So that section one in particular. The other one is the intersection between high school and higher education. I think there's a lot of great opportunity, because that's where you find career tech education, Emily, as you mentioned earlier. Career tech ed is critically important. That's where dual enrollment takes place. And as you tend to have these silos, that's where things can fall apart in terms of counseling, career advice, financial planning. So I would sort of draw a circle around this high school to the first part, the community college, the first 2 years of higher ed, saying that we can do a much better job of focused resources there to help that become more seamless and to help success happen.
Sure. Charter schools have been a real hot topic this year. You mentioned transparency for both public and charter. Any idea what that would look like in terms of, contract information posting online? That's something Democrats have talked about wanting.
Well, I'm open to looking at a lot of that, but the way I view it, though, is let's just ask the question for all schools. Because if you're a parent or someone concerned about education in our state, the first thing you should start with is to say, well, why should I treat this group differently than that? Don't we want the bar to be higher for everybody? So let's figure out a better system to say, how do we increase accountability and transparency for charters and public schools? The other part that goes with that is how do you make sure you're really seeing success? So I view it both from a financial point of view and an operational point of view.
Sure. You talked about declining enrollment being a problem. Are traditional public schools at risk because charter schools are stealing their students, or taking some of their students?
Well, again, you're seeing some of that because, again, parents and students are making a choice to say they think they're going to get a better educational opportunity. I mean, that's the decision. You can argue, was it based on marketing or whatever? But the other part that's taking place is we simply have fewer kids. We went through a lot of rough years there as a state. And that's where, if you look at the macro condition in the state, growing the state is critically important. And as you know, it wasn't just the schools in those areas. Some of those areas, people perceived they moved out to other places in Michigan or moved out of the state.
Sure.
Governor Snyder, this question comes from a commenter, Chris MBAH. I won't hazard to pronounce that last name. He says that attracting and retaining talent is a major obstacle in economic development in Southwest Michigan, especially in our community of Kalamazoo. How can the Office of Urban and Metropolitan Initiatives better work with small businesses in our local Chamber of Commerce to increase our economic attractiveness in more than simply our downtown district? I believe we're in need of innovation and innovators.
Yeah, well, again, Detroit's actually has a lot of great things going on in Midtown, downtown, but the question was more about southwestern Michigan or some of the other cities. There's some exciting things going on, and the Office of Urban Initiatives has actually been very proactive, bringing in some consultants to work with communities and find who's ready to really jump into this question. Kalamazoo is one of those communities. Kalamazoo has, through Southwest Michigan First and the city people themselves, they've done some good work to really see how they can make Kalamazoo a more livable area, and they've done some great work. I was down by the riverfront there, by the lake and stuff, and they've made parks and bridges and much more walkable community. There's still a number of things they can look at. How do you bring entrepreneurship and innovation in terms of business, not incubators, but accelerators? A town that's done very well at Ann Arbor has been a good model. Ann Arbor Spark was a great catalyst to get businesses coming downtown. Other communities are starting to adopt that. Another community I'm very high on, I appreciate them being proactive because you don't hear them talked about very often, is Jackson. Jackson has a program called Anchors Away, where their goal is to get somewhere in the range of 300 young people living in downtown Jackson. And the anchors are the main players in the community coming together to say, how can they create that environment, and look to how they work with developers downtown to create the residential living environment, but also that commercial environment, that street where you want to walk out and say, hey, there's my coffee shop, this is where I want to go hang out, here's where I can go listen to some music. That's exciting.
What a segue, Governor, because our next question comes from the Jackson Citizen Patriot. Ben Raven has a question for you.
Hello, Governor Snyder. This is Ben Raven from the Jackson Citizen Patriot. Projections show that Michigan is going to have a shortfall in electric capacity in 2016. Consumers Energy officials say without a guaranteed, regulated electric industry, they and other electric companies cannot invest the millions needed to increase capacity. How should the state of Michigan address this issue?
Well, that's a great question, Ben, because one of the things we need to do, and I'll, again, broaden the scope because that's what we're working on, is some years ago we came up with an energy policy for the state that it said here are targets for renewables, for some other things. We're pretty far along on the path of that. So through the end of 2013, we actually put out some pillars on energy policy that talked about adaptability, because there's no federal policy, so it needs to be flexible. But then looking at affordability, reliability, and then environmentally conscious, how to balance those measures. And so we sort of suspended that while the election season was going on, because it wouldn't have been a worthwhile discussion most likely. So what I plan to do is most likely a second special message on energy sometime during the first half of this next year to really outline what could be a 15 to 20 year plan for energy in our state. And it will include elements, in particular, I want to put an emphasis on energy efficiency. The best energy we have is what we don't use. And then look at how we become cleaner. So reduce coal, more cleaner fuels, whether it be natural gas and renewables. And then within the context, what are some parameters to say we can do things with renewables? And then looking at the rate structures, affordability and reliability would be part of that analysis. So it's a fairly comprehensive look to say, let's not just look at 2016, let's look at 15 to 20 years out. And the good part is I think we're pretty well positioned. It won't be easy, but compared to other states, we've got some very good positive things going for us.
Sure. What about the issue of deregulation, though? I mean, obviously there's at least some interest in the legislature about deregulating the electric industry.
Yeah, the choice question is a big one from a political point of view. And to be open with you, that's one of the things I want to manage carefully, because these other parameters I'm talking about, choice is not the primary driver. And that we've got right now a 10% choice program. I think that's a reasonable number. In some ways, we could talk, should it be lower in some ways? Unregulating, deregulating, I have some real concerns about that. One of the challenges with choice, though, is I want to make sure it's not being used as as an arbitrage program, where people are jumping in and out of the program to leverage the best rates at the expense of everyone else. So in terms of having some degree of choice, it might be okay, but if you make the choice, you've made a choice for a long time. Because you don't build these plants that last 5 years or 10 years. You're making 20 and 30 year investment decisions, and you do want some certainty about matching the revenue up with the assets.
Sure. Governor, obviously road funding has been your real priority here in lame duck. Anything else you really do want lawmakers to get done still this year in addition to that?
In terms of, there's some other bills in general, but they're not anywhere in the significance of energy. So I would, or excuse me, roads. Yeah. So I would put it in, if I did my list of 10 or 20 or 30, you'd hear me repeat transportation a lot.
Sure. So what's next for transportation? Are you meeting again today?
Yeah, there'll be another meeting today. We've met twice today. This is Wednesday, so we only have one more day in the legislative session on the current calendar. Decisions need to be made about moving forward with some plan.
Sure. Governor, another issue before the Senate right now, it looks like there's a little bit of a debate looming is medical marijuana changes. The House obviously last year already passed a bill that would have allowed some regulated dispensaries and edible products to be part of the landscape again. What do you think about those bills? Is there time to do that, or is now not the right time to take up that issue?
Good question, because it's a complex topic. It sounds simple, but when people get into it, you have to make sure you come out with thoughtful answers. So it might be possible, but I'm concerned there might not be enough time that all the issues are vetted out. I think it's a reasonable thing that the legislature should be establishing more practices, because there's a lot of uncertainty in the current environment, and to have a better regulatory scheme or a better organized structure would probably be helpful to everyone in the process.
Sure. One package the legislature already sent you would be a pilot program for drug testing welfare recipients. Medical marijuana would be exempt, so it's a slightly different topic. But I mean, do you think that's a program worth looking into? It looks like in some other states it hasn't had a huge impact and it's cost some money.
Well, what I'd say is I haven't looked at the final bill that's passed. I did give some kind of advice or letting them know what my concerns would be about the topic, and I'm happy to share those. I think they actually may have taken them into account, but I can't tell you that for sure. Is one that be a pilot program, and I know this is a pilot, and we get to select 3 counties. The second one was very important to me, though, is if someone's found to have an issue in terms of failing a drug test, I didn't believe they should be cut off. I don't think that's appropriate. If they're found to have a drug problem, we should help get them treatment. And how do we help them successfully get through it and hopefully not have that issue anymore, and if they need assistance, then how do we help them get a job? So it's really being proactive there. If it's a case where someone continually abuses a substance or refuses to get help, to be open with you, I don't have a big problem with saying they don't potentially deserve to get benefits. Again, you have to be sensitive to the issue if they have children and such, though.
Sure. I think it is 2 failed drug tests in that pilot program bill that advanced. So sounds like maybe they did take your advice. Emily, did you get these reader questions?
All right, Governor. This is from Lady Blue 76. Governor, we want to know where you stand on House Bill 4124, which is the bill that would give members at the veterans' homes the right to have an ombudsman. It seems really odd that prisoners in the state have an ombudsman, but yet the veterans who fought for this country and now through circumstances beyond their control have to live in one of the 2 veterans' homes do not have one.
I'm not familiar with that particular bill. What I would say is if anyone has an issue, any veterans issue, call 1-800-MISH-VET. We're actually leading the country by having the first 24/7, 365 one-stop center for veterans topics. And we partnered with United Way and 211, so I'm very proud of that. And I never like to hear people have concerns, but I would suggest they make a call and see if they can get some help, and if not, write me a letter, because again, that's the kind of thing we care about our vets. We've done a lot of improvements for our vets.
One more question. A couple people have brought up the Aramark contract, saying it still seems that they're having problems. Why not cancel the contract?
Well, again, I said it would take some time, and we've got an expert, former director of corrections in 2 states looking at this. And so I'll be having a discussion with him and our team about how the improvements have come, how far have they gone far enough, do we have real concerns about resolving the balance of the issues. So that's a discussion that will take place.
Sure. Governor, one more reader question here. We're just going to keep running through this. There was some change made in the most recent, I believe it was farm bill that passed, that sort of changed the way people could qualify for food stamps. Previously, through a heating program, there was sort of a roundabout way the state could offer more food assistance resources. Michigan was among a smaller group of states, I think, that didn't move to try and continue that after this change was made. Do you think that was the right public policy?
Well, I looked at some of the history when this went on, and it was a change at the federal government, and the federal government said they didn't think it was right nor fair for you to sort of add a relatively small amount to a heating benefit so you could qualify. And so that's sort of what many states were doing. And when you look at what the other states have done, they added more dollars, but it's still not a big dollar amount. So I'm not sure it really met the intent of what the federal government was trying to prevent. It may have gotten barely over the threshold because the federal government's perception is that was an abuse of a program. And I don't want to take advantage of that. In fact, one of the key spokesperson that talked about how this was a bad practice was Senator Stabenow. So I think I believe you can find some quotes from her that talked about how this was a really bad program and how it wasn't being used right.
Okay, sure. We've talked a lot about some controversial things from the past year. Let's shift gears a little bit. What do you see as your biggest success from 2014 as it comes to a close?
Well, there's probably three I'd put on the list. The bankruptcy in Detroit wrapping up. That was huge. And I want to thank the retirees. They did make a sacrifice. That was very difficult on their part. But I think if you look at the totality of the situation, Detroit is so much better off today than what it was. And it went better than I think almost anyone expected. And so that's huge, now setting up Detroit so we can all focus on growing the city, particularly the neighborhoods. The second one would be Healthy Michigan. Healthy Michigan has been a big success. We talked about the numbers earlier, about the number of people signing up, but not just that, the fact they're getting health care. These are lower income but hardworking people. Huge success there. And the last one would be in the job creation environment and helping our local governments would have been the personal property tax reform. Because that was something that was a competitive disadvantage for Michigan and also caused a lot of misallocations or challenges for local government. Now we've got a more competitive environment and local government has a steadier revenue stream.
Sure.
So those are three really big things. So we had a good 2014. Roads would be the one that helped put some icing on the cake here.
Okay, sure.
Governor, I know we talk a little bit about consolidating school districts, or if not districts, entire districts and services. This is a question from a resident of the Thumb here. Governor, my children attend one of the smallest public schools in the state, and from this institution they receive not only an excellent education, but also the kind of one-on-one attention I wish could be attained in all of our schools. I worry that part of your plan is to eliminate smaller schools like ours and have them absorbed by larger districts, leading to a lower quality of education. How, under your current financial plans for school funding, can smaller schools hope to stay open?
Well, again, it's by delivering great results. So what I've always said is I've never pushed legal consolidation, except in a very limited case where it's clear there's a failure. I've always pushed service consolidation and service sharing because that just seems to be a smart answer in terms of being more efficient. Again, you shouldn't do it if you don't see the value, but you should be asking that question. Longer term, I think there is a reasonable question about should we look at more consolidation, but that's ultimately a local decision. We've got over 500 school districts in our state. That's a lot of school districts. Same thing with municipalities, but again, let's start with service sharing, service consolidation. Because when you talk about legal consolidation, it changes the dialogue dramatically. People tend to get very protective. And so I don't spend a lot of time on that.
Governor, I'm guessing you and I are both going back to the Capitol in a little bit here to see what's going on with roads. So I want to wrap up with one reader question. What do you think of lame duck sessions, which is sort of what we're in here now? Do you think this is a good time to pass controversial bills, or should it be just a time to wrap up loose ends?
Well, it should be a time to wrap things up. Again, when you look at many legislators are leaving, so they have an interest of, they may have had projects they've worked on for a long time getting it concluded. You do get a concern about you could get some unusual things or things that could be challenging, and I always take that perspective when I'm reviewing them. So that's why, as you see, when you ask my priorities, I kept it really simple. I don't have a long laundry list of things I'm looking for. I would like to get roads done, and there are some other minor ones, but lame duck's just part of the realities of the legislative process. And I've managed through it once before, I'll manage through it this time.
Sure, all right. Well, thanks again, Governor, so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Great, well, happy holidays to you and all your listeners and readers and viewers.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hey, thanks.